I'm Kathryn. I'm a physiotherapist at Territory Sportsmed, and I'm working with the under 16s and under 23s academies here with the cricket players. Following exercise as a part of a dynamic warm-up you can use prior to training in an effort to warm up your muscles. It will reduce risk of injury and hopefully improve strength over time. The first thing we're going to work through is some run-throughs. Set up your cones over a 30-metre distance with 5 metres at the start, 20 metres in the middle and 5 metres at the end. So jogging out to the furthest cone and turn around and jog backwards, and repeating that exercise to do it a total of 4 times. Next up, you're going to move into a side step. Shuffling side to side, taking nice big steps in between and coming back. Next up, you've got high knees. So heading out forwards towards the cone, getting those knees up nice and high. Quick movements off the ground, spin around and come high knees on the way back. Next up is butt kicks. So really kicking those heels back towards your butt, getting a nice stretch at the front of your legs each time. Now you've got your high knee skips. So really driving your knee up and your opposite arm up on each movement, making sure you get that knee nice and high and your hands up towards your eye level. Next up is opening the gate, starting to open your hips and get them moving. Make sure you lift that knee up nice and high, staying really steady and even through your hips as you go. On the way back, switching up into closing the gate. Next up, you've got lunges. So walking through lunges, making sure you drop that back knee down and your front knee is heading out over your toes. On the way back, adding a twist to that lunge. So lunging down and twisting towards the side of the knee that's up and switch over. Staying nice and tall through your trunk as you twist and even through your hips. Next up is hamstring scoops or scooping the chooks. Really trying to get your hamstrings moving as you go through. Take a nice big step each time. On the way back, you've got a side squat. Squatting nice and low, really opening the hips up and switching sides. Make sure your knees aren't collapsing inwards. You're forcing them out over your toes and pushing your hips back as you go. Next up is a 5-metre grapevine and touchdown. So doing a grapevine out to the first cone, touching down and grapevine back. Next up is arabesques. Walking forwards, reaching your arms out and pressing that leg back and switch side. Make sure your hips stay level as you lean forward and that back leg stays in line with your trunk as you go. To finish off the dynamic warm-up, you're going to do 4 run-throughs. So the first one being a 75% run-through. Start off building to the first cone, hold for 20 metres at 75%, and then decelerate to the last cone. Your final 2 run-throughs of this dynamic warm-up are a 50% build-up, 100% effort inside the 20-metre cones, and then decelerating down at the end. So building up to 100% and slowing down. So that concludes the dynamic warm-up. Next up, we'll run through a series of stretches to include after your dynamic warm-up in an effort to increase mobility and reduce injury risk. First up, we've got a calf stretch. So come down onto hands and toes, pop 1 foot behind the opposite ankle and stretch out the calf of the toe that's on the ground. Hold for about 15 to 20 seconds and then switch sides. Next up is a hamstring stretch. So roll over into sitting and keeping your back nice and tall, hinging from the hips, reach out for your toes. You should feel this stretch up the back of your legs. If you can't get to your toes, just reach down to your ankles until you feel a stretch. Then moving on to stretching your glutes. So leaving one leg out straight, lift the other leg over, pull it in towards your chest and turn towards the side of the glute that you're stretching. Trying to sit up nice and tall as you do this one and switch sides after 15 to 20 seconds. Once you've given that glute a stretch, have a lay on your back to stretch out your low back. So 1 leg at a time, bringing that knee over the opposite leg and feel a stretch in your low back. Try and keep your shoulders flat on the ground and see if you can lower your knee towards the ground. After 15 seconds, switch sides. Next up is a stretch for your mid-back. Roll onto one side with your knees bent to about 90 degrees. With both hands out in front, you're going to do a bow and arrow stretch. So opening back up with that top shoulder to feel a stretch through your back and your chest. and then switch over to the other side. Try and keep your hips nice and upright, making sure that hip isn't rotating backwards as you open up. Next up is a hip flexor stretch. Come up into a kneeling position. Once you're in your kneeling position, think about tucking your hips under and a gentle push forward to try and get a stretch up the front of the hip of the knee that's on the ground. If you're not feeling the stretch enough, you can reach overhead with the arm of the side that's being stretched. After about 15 seconds, change sides. Next is stretching out your quads. So come up into standing, bending one knee all the way up and grab onto your foot behind you. Think about keeping your hips really level, your chest upright, and pushing your hip forward until you feel a stretch down the bent leg. Hold for 15 seconds and switch sides. Then moving on to upper body stretching, starting off with shoulders, bringing one arm across in front of your body into a cross body stretch. Stretching out the back of your shoulder, try and pull that arm into you as close as you can, and then stretch the other side. Moving on to a tricep stretch, drop one arm down behind your head, grab onto your elbow with your opposite arm, and try and pull that arm further down towards your back. You should feel this stretch right up the back of that arm that's really bent, and switch sides. To finish off your upper body stretching, you're going to do an elbow and wrist stretch. So pulling one hand down and trying to get that elbow nice and straight. You should feel a stretch right up your forearm as you do this. And after 15 to 20 seconds, switch sides. And that concludes the stretching routine.